did you guys hear the latest? They are saying that 50 Cent is saying Rick Ross is going broke. When I first heard it, I said, no way. Rick Ross, he got all those restaurants. You know, he got a lot of stuff going on from he's a businessman. No way he's going to allow to go broke. But you know what? These guys, they like to gamble. They like to do a lot of different stuff. And then all those lawsuits, all those baby mamas. And I got to thinking, well, let me watch the video. Let me see what 50 Cent is reacting to, because maybe they know something I don't. So I came across this video. Let's react to it. I want to know, do you guys like this niche or not? So comment. I love when you guys comment. Let's see what's going on. Let's react.
50 Cent is reacting to Rick Ross allegedly going broke, and the internet is absolutely on fire right now. The man who has been called the biggest boss that you've seen thus far, is now facing questions about his financial situation that have left fans and critics completely divided. Is Rick Ross actually running out of money, or is this just the internet doing what the internet does, taking a few viral moments and spinning them into a whole narrative? Because here's what we know for sure. There are images circulating of Rick Ross allegedly flying economy class on a commercial flight. The same man who has rapped about private jets for his entire career. There are serious questions being raised about whether the AP watch he has been spotted wearing is actually authentic or a very expensive looking replica. And the numbers coming back from some of his recent shows are raising eyebrows in ways that are hard to dismiss. Behind the boss persona, behind the Maybach music aesthetic and the mansion flexes in the car collection, there is a financial picture that people are starting to examine very closely. And what they are finding is more complicated than anyone imagined. The shocking truth behind what is driving this broke narrative is deeper and more layered than most people realize. And we are about to break it all down. And to make the whole situation even more explosive, 50 Cent, the one man who has dedicated years of his life to exposing Rick Ross, is watching all of this unfold and cannot contain himself. Yo, what's good, fam? We are about to dive deep into some real industry politics and financial drama that has been shaking up the hip-hop community, something serious. Today, we are going all the way in on the 50 Cent and Rick Ross situation, the broke allegations, the receipts people are pointing to, and what the full picture actually looks like when you put it all together. So stay locked in, because this one is going to go places. Now, before we get into this wild ride, let me keep it 100 with y'all. The idea of Rick Ross going broke has been circulating in comment sections and on social media timelines for a little while now, but recently it has crossed over from fringe speculation into genuine mainstream conversation, and that shift happened fast. People who never paid attention to the beef, never followed the financial details, never dug into the touring numbers. Even those people are now seeing the headlines and asking real questions. But yo, we about to separate the facts from the fiction, the real from the fake, and give you a complete picture that goes beyond the memes and the dunks. To understand where things stand right now, you have to understand the history. Because the 50 Cent and Rick Ross beef is not some new development, it is one of the longest running, most layered conflicts in hip hop, and it provides the entire context for why 50's reactions to the current situation land the way they do. So check it. The conflict between these two goes back to around 2008 and 2009. And it started with information that 50 Cent put into the public space that struck directly at the foundation of Rick Ross's image. 50 exposed that before Rick Ross became the boss, before the rap career, before the Maybach music empire, William Leonard Roberts II had worked as a correctional officer at a Florida state prison. Now, in the context of hip-hop culture, that revelation was significant. Ross had built his persona entirely around the street image, the drug lord aesthetic, the idea that he was living the life he rapped about. Finding out that he had worked as a corrections officer, a CO, someone on the opposite side of the system from the image he projected, was the kind of information that could unravel everything. Now in the hood, we know that authenticity is the currency that hip-hop runs on. It is not just about the music. It is about whether what you present to the world matches who you actually are. And the CO revelation opened a crack in Ross's armor that 50 has been widening ever since. Ross's response was to largely deny and deflect, and his fan base stayed loyal, and his commercial success actually continued pretty strongly through that period. But the seed of doubt was planted, and 50 made sure it never fully went away. The beef evolved over the years into a multi-front conflict. There were diss tracks, there were social media exchanges, There were legal disputes around various issues. 50 made mocking Rick Ross practically a signature element of his public persona. Not something he did once and moved on from, but an ongoing project that he returned to consistently whenever new material presented itself. And what makes 50 uniquely effective in this kind of situation is his mastery of social media as a weapon. He does not just comment, he finds the exact angle that maximizes embarrassment, packages it for viral spread, and delivers it with comedic timing that makes it almost impossible to defend against. But here's where it gets real. For a long time, Ross was able to absorb the attacks because his commercial performance was strong enough to validate the image, even when the origins of that image were being questioned. When you are putting out #1 albums, when your label is running deep with successful artists, when the tours are selling, when the brand partnerships are coming in, you can weather a lot of criticism because the proof appears to be in the results. The Balls was making Balls money, and that reality made the attacks feel more like hating than legitimate critique. The real question is what changed? And fam, this is where the financial timeline becomes essential to understand. Let's talk about Rick Ross at his peak, because the peak was real and it was impressive. During roughly 2008 through 2014, Ross was operating at a genuinely high commercial level. Port of Miami, Triller, Deeper Than Rap, Teflon Dawn. These were albums that moved significant units, generated real streaming activity as that model emerged, and established Ross as one of the most consistent commercial performers in hip-hop. Maybach Music Group, his label imprint under Warner Brothers, gave him the platform to be not just an artist, but a mogul. He signed artists, he executive produced, he built an ecosystem around his name that generated revenue from multiple directions simultaneously. Forbes and various music business outlets estimated his earnings during peak years in the range of several $million annually when you combine music revenue, touring, the label operations, and business ventures, including his involvement with Wingstop franchises. The diversified income picture looked like what you would expect from a genuine hip-hop mogul operating at the highest level. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part that the broke narrative is built on. The music industry went through a fundamental transformation starting around 2015 and accelerating from there. Physical and digital album sales, which had been a primary revenue driver for artists who moved units the way Ross did, collapsed across the board as streaming became the dominant consumption model. And streaming, while it generates ongoing passive income from catalog, pays at rates that are notoriously low. Unless you are consistently in the absolute top tier of streaming performers, the Drake level, the Kendrick level, the artists who are racking up hundreds of millions of streams on every release, the streaming money alone does not sustain a lifestyle operating at the scale Ross has always projected. Let me break down for y'all what this means in practical terms. An artist earning 1 million streams on the track through Spotify earns approximately $3,000 to $5,000 from that platform. Now multiply that across a catalog and you get a more substantial number. But you also have to account for the splits with labels, publishers, and collaborators that reduce the artist's actual take-home. For an artist like Ross, who built his commercial model in an era of album sales and has transitioned into a streaming landscape, the revenue picture looks meaningfully different from what it did at peak. Now let's talk about what appears to have remained constant while the income picture was potentially shifting. The mansions still exist. Ross has been associated with significant real estate, including a famously large property in Georgia that he has spoken about extensively. Properties at that scale carry enormous ongoing costs: property taxes, maintenance, staff, utilities, insurance. These are not one-time purchases. They are ongoing financial obligations that require consistent cash flow to sustain. The cars, the jewelry, the travel, the entourage, all of it costs money continuously. And the public image, the brand that Ross has spent his entire career building, requires ongoing investment to maintain. The real kicker, though, is that the gap between what the income may look like now compared to peak years and what the spending appears to remain is exactly where the speculation about financial strain originates. This is not unique to Rick Ross. It is a pattern that has affected many artists who experienced major commercial success in one economic model and found themselves navigating a significantly different landscape without fully adjusting their financial structure. But because Ross's entire brand is built on projecting wealth, any evidence that the reality might not match the projection hits differently than it would for an artist whose persona was never defined by financial flexing. Now let's get into the specific incidents that have taken this from background speculation to front page conversation, because the receipts are what turned this into a viral moment. The economy class flight situation hit first and hit hard. Rick Ross has made private jet travel a central element of his public persona for years. References to private aviation are woven throughout his music and his social media content. The private jet is not just a flex. It is a symbol of the level Ross claims to operate at. It is core to the Balls mythology. So when images and reports surfaced showing Ross allegedly on a commercial flight in an economy seat, the internet reacted with the energy of people who have been handed exactly the evidence they were looking for. Now, real talk, there are legitimate reasons why someone might fly commercial even if they have access to private aviation. Schedules, availability, logistics, these things happen. But the reason this moment landed so hard for Ross specifically is the extreme specificity of his claims about how he moves. When you have spent years telling the world that private jets are simply your standard mode of travel, getting seen in economy on a commercial flight is not a neutral observation. It becomes Exhibit A in a case that skeptics were already building. The memes came instantly. The commentary was relentless. And 50 Cent was right there at the center of it, amplifying the moment with the precision of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of ammunition. 50's reaction was immediate and surgical. The posts, the captions, the way he framed the situation, all of it was designed to make the moment as devastating as possible to Ross's image. And what makes 50's involvement so effective is that he does not react in isolation. He connects each new incident to the larger narrative he has been building for years. So when he dunks on the economy flight, it lands harder because he immediately ties it to the correctional officer history, to older inconsistencies, to the overall pattern he has been documenting. He is not just making a joke about one flight. He is presenting it as the latest piece of evidence in a case he has been making for over a decade. That's some real cultural warfare right there, and 50 is genuinely one of the best in the game at fighting it. But the economy flight was just the opening. The fake AP watch situation added another layer that made things significantly more complicated for Ross's credibility. The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak is one of the most iconic and coveted luxury watches in the world. In hip-hop culture specifically, the AP is a statement piece that communicates a very specific level of financial arrival. These watches, depending on the reference and configuration, can cost anywhere from $30,000 at entry level to several $100,000 for diamond set custom pieces. Owning an authentic AP at this level is not just a flex, it is a credential. It says something specific about where you are financially. So when people in the jewelry and watch community started raising questions about whether a watch Rick Ross was publicly wearing, presenting as an authentic AP, might actually be a high-quality replica, the implications went beyond one piece of jewelry. The watch enthusiast community is deeply knowledgeable and extremely detail-oriented. They analyze footage frame by frame. They look at dial details, case finishing, bracelet construction, crown placement, elements that are difficult to replicate perfectly even in a sophisticated fake. And the commentary from people in that community about Ross's watch was not favorable. Ross never fully and definitively addressed these questions in a way that satisfied the skeptics. And the absence of a clear, verifiable response allowed the narrative to continue growing. Combined with the economy flight moment, the watch situation started painting a picture of someone whose financial reality might not be keeping pace with the image they are projecting. And that picture was circulating to millions of people. Let that sink in for a minute. Every single flex, every single public display of wealth, every social media post showing the cars and the jewelry and the lifestyle, all of it is now being filtered through a lens of heightened skepticism that these incidents created. Once the audience starts looking for inconsistencies, they find them everywhere, whether they are real or not. Now let's talk about the touring situation, because this is where we get into some of the most concrete financial data points in this whole conversation. A legacy artist at Rick Ross's level, live performance is typically the most reliable and substantial income stream available in today's music landscape. Album sales are a fraction of what they used to be. Streaming pays low per play rates, but putting bodies in seats and performing live still generates real, significant money. A successful headlining run can net an artist millions of dollars even in the current environment. The street's been talking though, and what people are saying about some of Ross's recent performance dates is not what you want to hear if you are managing his brand. Reports from fans who attended shows and observers tracking ticket availability pointed to venues that were not reaching capacity, ticket prices being discounted significantly in the days and hours leading up to shows, and crowd sizes that did not match the scale you would expect from an artist of Ross's profile and name recognition. Now, this is where we got to address something important. Individual show performance is affected by many variables: market selection, timing, ticket pricing strategy, competition from other events, local promotion quality. You cannot look at any single date and draw sweeping conclusions, but the pattern that emerged across multiple observations and multiple markets, combined with all the other financial questions already swirling, made it very difficult to dismiss the touring narrative as isolated incidents. For y'all who might not understand what underperforming tours mean financially, let me explain. A major artist on the road carries significant operational costs: crew salaries, equipment transportation, accommodation for a traveling party, production costs for stage setup and sound, venue guarantees. These costs are substantial, and they exist regardless of how many tickets sell. If the revenue from ticket sales does not meet projections, the tour is not just less profitable, it can actually operate at a loss. Multiply that across multiple underperforming dates, and you are looking at a situation where the touring operation, which should be generating income, is potentially costing money instead. And 50 Cent watched all of this and kept feeding the conversation. Every new piece of information that surfaced about Ross's shows, his attendance figures, his ticket prices, 50 was there to amplify it, comment on it, and tie it back to the broader narrative. The man has built a genuine media operation around his ability to troll Rick Ross. And right now that operation is running at full capacity. But this is where the story gets deeper than just internet beef and viral moments. See, what the 50 Cent and Rick Ross situation actually represents is a collision between two very different philosophies about image, authenticity, and what hip-hop is supposed to value. 50 Cent's own story is built on a foundation that withstood significant scrutiny. He got shot 9 times. He came from Southside Queens. He fought his way from mixtapes to a record deal that was worth tens of millions of dollars. His wealth, while sometimes exaggerated in his own music, has been demonstrable in ways that go beyond social media posts. His G-Unit brand, his deal with Vitamin Water that generated a reported $60 to $100 million, his television production success with Power, and his various spinoffs. These are verifiable, documented financial achievements. When 50 calls someone out for not being who they claim to be, he is speaking from a position of having built something real that can withstand examination. Rick Ross's situation is fundamentally different because the foundation of his brand, the drug lord persona, the lifestyle claims, the image of operating outside the system, was always more constructed than 50's. That does not make the music less good or the career less impressive, but it means the image is more vulnerable when challenged because it was always dependent on the audience accepting the presentation without too much scrutiny. Now, this ain't just about Rick Ross versus 50 Cent. This is about something bigger. This is about what happens in the social media age when the gap between image and reality becomes visible to millions of people simultaneously. Hip-hop has always had artists who embellish their situations. It is practically a tradition in the genre. But there was always a limit to how much the audience could scrutinize those embellishments because information was harder to access and spread. Today, that has completely changed. A video of a rapper flying economy spreads to 10 million people in 24 hours. A jewelry expert analyzing a watch frame by frame gets 2 million views. A fan posting about empty seats at a concert venue reaches the entire internet instantly. The scrutiny that exists today is of a completely different magnitude than anything that existed even 15 years ago. And 50 Cent, who was an early pioneer of using social media as a weapon against opponents, understands this better than almost anyone. He does not just react to these moments. He engineers their spread. He ensures that what might have been a minor observation seen by a few thousand people becomes a story seen by millions. That amplification is what makes his involvement so powerful and so damaging to Ross's image. The real kicker, though, is what this whole situation means for Rick Ross going forward, because the narrative has now taken on a life of its own that exists independent of any specific incident. Even if every individual claim were debunked, even if someone definitively proved the watch was real, Explained the economy flight as a one-time logistical situation, showed that the tour numbers were being misrepresented. The narrative of Ross going broke would continue to circulate. That is the nature of how these stories work on the internet. Once the frame is established, evidence that challenges it gets filtered through the lens of the frame rather than displacing it. Ross's options at this point are limited, and none of them are comfortable. He can continue doing what he is doing, maintaining the image, posting the flexes, dropping music, going on tour, and hope that enough new positive content drowns out the negative narrative. He can engage directly with the questions and attempt to refute them with verifiable evidence, which carries its own risks because any gaps that emerge in that transparency could be far more damaging than the current speculation. Or he can evolve the brand in a direction that does not depend so heavily on financial projection for its power, something that would require a significant artistic and personal pivot at a stage in his career where reinvention is genuinely difficult. What he almost certainly cannot do is make 50 Cent stop, because 50 is not motivated by money or by any outcome that Ross can offer him. This has become personal. It has become a signature element of 50's public identity. And as long as the internet keeps generating material for him to react to, he will keep reacting. The economy flight gave him content. The watch situation gave him content. Every tour date that raises questions, every financial report that surfaces, every moment where the image does not hold up under scrutiny, all of it becomes new ammunition. And 50 Cent is a man who knows exactly what to do with ammunition. At the end of the day, Rick Ross's situation is not just about whether he is broke or not broke. It is about the sustainability of an image built entirely on the projection of wealth, in an era where that projection is subject to unprecedented scrutiny. It is about what happens when the distance between the persona and the person becomes too large to maintain comfortably. And it is about the role that a determined, skilled, and relentless opponent plays in making sure that distance stays visible to the public. The real question is whether Rick Ross has the resources, financial, creative, and personal, to navigate this moment and come out the other side with his brand intact. Hip-hop has seen artists survive serious image crises before. It has also seen artists whose brands could not withstand the pressure of sustained scrutiny. Which category Ross ultimately falls into is something only time will tell. But right now, in this moment, the conversation is happening. The questions are being asked. The receipts are circulating. And 50 Cent is sitting back watching all of it with the energy of a man who has been waiting a very long time to say, "I told you so." What are your thoughts on Rick Ross's situation and where things go from here for the Balls? Do you think the broke narrative is built on real evidence, or is this just internet speculation getting out of hand?